My name is Stephen Young, and the first thing I'd like to do is just to say welcome and thank you all very much for making the effort to come and see us this morning. We're extremely pleased to be given the opportunity to come here in this, the 100th year of the Finnish Air Force, to be able to represent the 4 partner nations across Europe, that's the UK, Spain, Germany and Italy, and also the companies, BAE Systems, Airbus, Rolls-Royce, Eurojet, MBDA and many others spread across Europe that represent the largest collaborative defence programme in Europe, that is the Eurofighter. We're here for the next few days. Please do come back, ask any questions. I'm not going to say any more, but please enjoy the coffee and the food. And I'm going to hand you over to our 2 representatives. Now, in true fighter pilot fashion, they both have fantastic call signs. So I'd like to introduce to you Klaschka, 18-year veteran of the German Air Force, and also Mufti, 23-year veteran of the Royal Air Force. So without further ado, please, Klaschka and Mufti.
Thanks, Stephen. So my name is Paul Smith, call sign Mufti, 23 years in the Royal Air Force. I started off operationally flying the Tornado F3, did my fighter pilot training in the Euro-NATO joint jet pilot training as Klaschka did over in the US. So as well as the F3, then I went on to the Typhoon. I've also flown in the F16 and the F18, so reasonable F-series experience. And I was a fighter weapons school instructor, so I instructed the UK's Top Guns on both F3 and Typhoon. Over 600 hours on Typhoon and operational test as well as frontline experience. I was the executive officer on the first frontline squadron and then did about 4.5 years operational test, working a lot with the US Navy and the US Air Force and the States. So, Klaschka.
Right, tell you what, I'm excited. Why? It's the first time in Finland. I'm excited because it's not as cold as I expected to be in Finland, so it's a nice warm summer day, so thanks for that. And I'm also excited about Europe, about European air defense, and about the Eurofighter Typhoon. Because right now, it's exciting times for any fighter program, and again, it's exciting times for Europe's air defense. I'm Raffael Klaschka, I'm the head of marketing of Eurofighter GmbH. I'm based in Munich, which is in Germany. Down in the south, you might know it from the Oktoberfest, lots of beer, lots of sausage, lots of potatoes, so that's quite Germany. As mentioned before, I was 18 years in the German Air Force, flying the mighty F4 Phantom. I flew the F-18 Hornet, as well as Finland does, and I flew the Eurofighter Typhoon. In total, I got 2,500 flying hours, and I'm more than happy to share the next 5 to 500 minutes with you and with Mufti. Thank you.
Great stuff. Okay, so that's our kind of introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about what Eurofighter is doing on operations right now around the world. And that kind of, I think, will give you an idea of the capabilities of the aircraft, give you a real confidence in what the aircraft is doing right now, before leading into the sort of capabilities that we are looking at for the HX program for Finland. So the aircraft is constantly evolving, and there's very much flexibility built into the aircraft, right into the heart of the aircraft, and that's what we're going to look at for you. I'm going to wait for the cleaner to go past. I thought I was going to have to fight against jet noise actually, but so an industrial cleaner is a little bit easier to talk across. We'll talk a little bit about weapons capability, and then I'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers at the end, guys. Okay? So please, if you don't understand, if I talk too quickly, or you can't understand my English, I'll get Klaschka to translate for me, because he speaks English far more clear than I do. But if you have something, please stop me if you don't understand something. Otherwise, we'll field most of the questions at the end. I'm really happy to you to ask anything you like. The briefing is unclassified, clearly in a public environment, but we can talk conceptually about pretty much any of the capabilities on the aircraft. Obviously, in an unclassified form, we can't get into specific numbers, but other than that, we're happy to talk anything. In terms of the intro, then really, our major point is the Eurofighter really is 4 aircraft in one, or if you like, a platform for any weapon, any scenario, any tactical threat. It was designed from the outset to dominate the air. That was the focus of the aircraft, always designed with multi-role in mind, but the absolute key design drivers of the aircraft were performance and the ability to defend airspace against any threat now and in the future, and that's really what's driven the design. So air dominance is really at the heart of the aircraft, and that's, you know, I think key for any nation looking to preserve its national defence. Contested airspace strike, so any theatre where there are severe or future surface-to-air missile threats, where you have to fight through air and surface threats and precisely lay down weapons. The aircraft does that very well right now and will continue to do that in the future. And survivable in a hostile environment, so both in terms of electronic warfare, electronic attack. It has a broad range of capabilities now, and looking forwards, those are further enhanced with particularly with the new radar system. So really can survive and shape those future battle spaces, and that's key to the aircraft. And then finally, it really has a great range of sensors on, so very advanced intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities. Key for Finland, I think, is that there are no closed black boxes inside the Eurofighter for European partner nations. You will have access to all of the data. Finnish industry will have the opportunity to invest and to actually take part in all of those capabilities. So in terms of actually Finland knowing and having full control of the capabilities, I think that's a fairly unique offering from Eurofighter, and it's right in the heart of our DNA. Where Klaschka works, all the four nations work closely day in, day out. I also lived in Bavaria enjoying the beer and sausages. So it's right in our heart, and you know, the Finns would have the opportunity to come down to Munich and actually, you know, take part in that as well. So highly available, cost effective, that will really deter any threat and protect Finnish airspace. Those are just some numbers. What's the idea of this slide really is to give you an idea. Eurofighter is a big program. It's Europe's biggest defence program. Over 623 aircraft ordered, and obviously out in the Gulf as well. So we have a lot of Middle Eastern partners who we work very closely with. But at the heart of the aircraft are the four, major European partner nations who build and operate that aircraft. Typhoons all across Europe, so a range of squadrons around Europe operating the aircraft. What's the point here is you're going to have a lot of wingmen in your immediate vicinity, as you already do actually with the Baltic Air Police. You want to talk through where the aircraft's made, Max, and just mention that briefly?
Well, as you see, you have the aircraft with different parts of assembly, and they're all dedicated to a certain country, the so-called core nations, which would be then Germany, UK, Spain and Italy. And therefore you have different several parts of the aircraft which come from a certain nation. And then they are all mounted together in a so-called final assembly line. And every core nation of those four has a so-called final assembly line. So 4 in total right now. And that's how the Eurofighter Typhoon is built. And my daily work at Eurofighter GmbH, all my colleagues are not Germans, they're Brits, they're from Italy and they're from Spain, so it's a truly European spirit behind it. And it's in the DNA of the program, this collaboration and this multicultural setup that we have. But at the end, it's a European setup.
Great stuff. So, at the heart of it, European customers, Eurofighter and Eurojet, who make the engines, European companies. So the three largest aerospace companies in Europe: BAE Systems, Airbus Defence and Space in in Germany and Spain, and Leonardo in Italy, but also around Europe as well. So really a truly European project. Do you want to just talk through what the Eurofighter CEO, Volker Polster, has to say about the future?
It's exciting times for Europe. We're looking in total, and Finland is not alone in total, we're looking into potentially more than 200 more Eurofighters being purchased around the world. So we have a lot of countries looking into enforcing and replacing their fighter fleets. And the Eurofighter Typhoon in this contest is a primary choice of aircraft to look at. And therefore we have a strong movement in Europe to look into this kind of programs. And right now we have almost 500 Eurofighter Typhoons protecting Europe, protecting European airspace, protecting nearly half the population of Europe and about 2 million square kilometers. I looked this up. So Europe is really, let's say, full of typhoons in the skies. That's the one part. That's the daily national QRA operations. On the other side, at the east flank, you have Eurofighter Typhoons protecting on a regular basis from the Baltics, where I have been, as well as an operational pilot, and I'll share some stories later. You know, pilots like to share the stories, even if nobody wants to hear them, but I'm sure you want to hear them. Down to the Black Sea, and we have really a strong defense in the east flank provided by Typhoons. Right now we have an Italian deployment of Typhoons in the Baltics, and in the near future it will be replaced by a German deployment of Typhoons again. So the Typhoon really has a footprint already in Europe. We're working hard to enforce this footprint.
Thanks. And one of the key messages from Volker, I think, was, yeah, I would totally agree that we expect Eurofighter to be the dominant aircraft in Europe for the next 30 to 40 years at the minimum. It's worth just, there's a lot of numbers on that slide. Really, what I want to talk about here is the basic airframe engine combination of Typhoon. If we look at sort of past generation of aircraft like the F-16 or F-18, the F-16 was incredibly successful around Europe because they got the basics right. You had a good engine and a very agile, lightweight airframe. That's why even now, 40 years later, the F-16 is still being built. I think it's fair to say that the Typhoon is the equivalent of that for the current generation of aircraft. The thruster weight of the Typhoon, you can look up, there is no aircraft that has that airframe engine combination, the raw power and agility. The only aircraft in the same class is the Raptor. So if you look around across any of the competitors, any of our adversaries, Typhoon outperforms, outclimbs and out-accelerates those aircraft. If you get those basic aerodynamic and engine capabilities correct, you can change out the avionics, you can update the software, you can put new weapons on the aircraft. And that's why I firmly believe Typhoon will be around for the next 40 to 50 years, right at the heart and providing a great deterrence. Go on, Max.
I know it's a very small number in terms of size, but also in terms of the pure number. It's from brakes off to takeoff, less than 8 seconds. So this brings a smile in my face. Why? This means you slam the throttles forward, you are airborne in less than 8 seconds, and it takes you only a few minutes, and you're up there at 40,000 feet operational combat airspeed. So why is this important? On the one side, definitely for air defense. If I remember the times in the Baltics when we had these missions, where we had alpha scrambles, so there was real-life missions. You took like 2 minutes and you're up there flying supersonic with super cruise towards the object that you had to identify. And it gives you the further feeling that you have the best kit right now under your seat. And this is the one part. The other part is, which is rarely mentioned, having such a big power excess, so much thrust. That means when you use the aircraft as a multi-role aircraft, and again, I talk as an ex-Hornet pilot, that is a factor. When you have full ordnance on the aircraft, on the Typhoon, it's still very, very maneuverable because it has so much specific excess power. And when you fly the aircraft in a multi-role configuration, because it is so powerful, you always have, it doesn't matter what kind of air-to-ground configuration you have, you will always have the standard full air-to-air load with Meteor and SRAM and fully loaded gun. So this is the standard, and that means that's just capability. And again, this is in Europe, the benchmark.
And you know, I guess one final point in the context of Finland, where you disperse your aircraft in an air-to-air fit, you can get airborne in just over 1,000 feet of runway. So you know, if you're dispersing out to remote operating areas, that gives you a real flexibility, really an excellent capability. We both touched on this. Typhoon, the Eurofighter, has been all around the world. I mean, right from North America, where both of us have been on exercise, and we'll talk about exercises shortly, down to the Falkland Islands, which is not the end of the world, but the end of the world is just around the corner. You can see it when you get airborne. It really is a very remote place. We had 4 Typhoons. We keep 4 Typhoons down there, and literally we left the aircraft down there for 4 years, so they were 24/7, pure 365 days a year. A very remote operation, a bit like dispersed operations akin to what the Finnish Air Force does, and that shows just how supportable and available the aircraft is in those really hostile environments. Round to the Middle East, obviously a lot of work in the Middle East, but yeah, we've both the UK and the Luftwaffe have also done Arctic Challenge, so we're in this part of the world a lot, and we'll be bringing our Typhoons up to Finland in the next 2 years to actually demonstrate to the Finnish Air Force how available, how dispersed operations are really quite straightforward with the Typhoon. The headlines of operations, yes, as Klaschka said, we're in Baltic air policing. The Luftwaffe has done 4 deployments, at least. Italians 3, as has the RAF and Spain. Spain there right now. So actually, for most of the recent few years of Baltic air policing, Typhoon has been doing about half of those Baltic air policing operations in terms of the weight of aircraft out there. So really the backbone of Baltic air policing, which gives us great familiarity with this part of the world and operating in this kind of environment. OpShader is the name for the Royal Air Force multi-role operations against Daesh and ISIS, and obviously all of the nations are doing QRA 24/7. Unified Protector was the operations in Libya, operating out of Cyprus and Italy. So both the Royal Air Force and Italy were involved in that operation as well. We didn't mention the Baltic air policing and QRA from the Falklands and the Middle East. So the aircraft's doing that defensive airspace operations really around the world. Klaschka is more recent than me in terms of being out there, so this is the range of aircraft and threats that Typhoon has intercepted. So everything from the MiG-31 Foxhound through to the Su-34 fullback, all of these aircraft have tested the defensive of the Baltic airspace as they're doing on a daily basis here in Finland. And Typhoon really has the sensors, the weapons and the performance to defend against any of those threats. Anything you want to add, Klaschka?
It starts right at the ground. You have to imagine if you are being scrambled, you get up from your seat, you run to your aircraft. While you are hopping into the aircraft and starting to strap in, you just put the throttles forward, the engine starts. So everything is really, in a way, designed that it's like this, starting, the pilot can concentrate on the mission, is receiving the first inputs via the Link 16 data link, gets a recognized air picture, and can already build on the situational awareness. So this is really a good example that this aircraft was truly built for that, to project air defense, to have all the important bits and bytes, like strong engines, sensors, but also the engine itself, the reliability, everything you need to be good in this role. And as you mentioned before, I remember those missions. I have been in 2000 and I think it was 2005 with the F4 Phantom, in the same mission, and in Lithuania, also Baltic air policing. That's when the NATO started with it. It was quite a different feeling from an aircraft where you know you are not in line anymore with whatever's out there. And then again, 10 years later with a Typhoon, where you know exactly, you're like, hey, I'm not only on eye level, normally even above. And I say this with being fully proud of what this aircraft can really deliver. And yeah, we'll talk days for that.
Okay, and you know, one of the things of being on Baltic air policing is we operate a lot. So here's Royal Air Force Typhoons flying alongside Finnish Hornets, and you know, it gives us great confidence in the interoperability. And you know, on the Link 16, the Hornet picture gets my SA, and I get all of the information that the Finnish guy has on his Hornet. And that's a key thing in terms of data links. It's not just being on JTIDs or Link 16 or MIDS, it's actually what layers of information can you pass, and really that's where we've spent a lot of effort on the Eurofighter program and the Eurofighter Air Forces, really integrating with the US platforms, and we share depths of data that maybe other European programs don't with our US allies. So it's as close to being in a US aircraft in terms of interoperability with the US as you can possibly be. And just some numbers. People like statistics, or some people like statistics. So the Italians in 2015 had a tactical evaluation by NATO, by an independent evaluation team, and they were assessed as excellent across the board in the air policing role, with 99.4 mission availability. And in that 3-month period, 40 alpha scrambles, which, as Klaschka said, is a live scramble. It's when some aircraft are testing the Baltic air police. They haven't fired a flight plan. They're not squawking identification friend or foe. They are testing the air defences, and the aircraft's perfectly designed to do that. In addition, they had 116 Tango or training scrambles in the same period. So enough on air policing for the moment. We'll come back to the air dominance capability of the aircraft. But a little bit about multi-role operations, particularly over Iraq and Syria. Both the Royal Air Force and the Royal Saudi Air Force are completing that. The roles, we talk about AI, so air interdiction, so pre-planned strike, where you want to be very precise, where you know before you get airborne the weapon, the targets that you're going to hit. Close air support, where you have friendly or coalition troops such as the Iraqi armed forces or the Kurdish Peshmerga very close to the hostiles, and you have to discriminate and be very specific in your targeting. And then strike coordination and reconnaissance. It's kind of similar, but you probably won't have so many friendlies in the vicinity, but you have to find, fix and target very rapidly with your own sensors. So finding those targets, and that's where really the sensors and the HMI, or the PVI, pilot vehicle interface, how that information is passed to the pilot. And I'm going to talk about why Typhoon is so effective. In that area as well, it's worth noting that in terms of strategic deconfliction, a lot of NATO aircraft out there, all on the same data links, all coordinated, all flight planned and planning together, but also obviously you have a lot of Russian aircraft over there and Syrian aircraft. So it's quite a tricky situation in terms of deconflicting that. One of the performance benefits of Typhoon from the guys talking to me is because of the power of the aircraft, we are capping and flying 10 to 15,000 feet above all of the Soviet and actually the F-series US jets around in the region. So that excess power just puts you above all of those other aircraft, gives you a big tactical advantage, but just makes deconfliction a lot easier as well. And so the guys are coming back with 4 Paveway 4s with you know, at sort of 50,000+ feet, and nobody else is there. So just and that obviously puts you above a lot of the older threat systems as well, not so much the new systems. This is just an example of one particular mission from a friend of mine, Wing Commander Sutton, carried out in Iraq in January 16. So they were up in the north of Iraq. So what you're seeing here is the central part of Iraq, so western Iraq here, Ramadi, across to Baghdad. And they were actually tasked a pair of Typhoons up in Mosul in the north. So that again, the performance of the aircraft and the fuel efficiency means that you can reposition very, very quickly. So retasked from Mosul. They initially were given coordinates for a heavy gun site and a weapons building that they had to strike, and they hit that very precisely. Then there was a sniper position causing some problems. All in one mission this is going on. Then troops in contact, so that's when you have friendly forces in contact with hostiles, so you have to ID where the friendlies and the hostiles are. And in that particular engagement, they did a Paveway 4, so a GPS laser-guided bomb spiked into the trench position. They self-designated an attack onto troops fighting, hostile troops fighting. They were very close in contact with hostile and friendly troops, so too close for a laser-guided or precision-guided bomb. So he actually used a 27mm Mauser cannon to strafe into a trench line. And then finally, they buddy spiked, so one of the Typhoons spiked for the other, a Paveway 4 laser-guided bomb into troops dug in scrubland. So quite a busy sortie, yes.
Let me ask, did you get an assignment at Mosul for all these items, or did you get actually some airborne, so you can actually get accurate information and supposing you have all the weapons there?
Yeah, well that's one of the things I was trying to bring out in this sortie. This was all very reactive, so precision strikes pretty easy when you get all that information before you get airborne. But actually in Typhoon I can receive all of that information digitally, and so this was very much a reactive sortie. They were planning to be up in Mosul, that was the task. Whatever aircraft were tasked down in the south obviously didn't have the weapons or the sensor capability to meet these threats, so they flexibly moved south, and then they were getting those updates through the sortie of this is a target. Right, now I need you to come over here, find the friendlies, find the hostiles. And so there would have been a combination of digital updates of locations and also more rough locations where they had to find and fix the targets.
It's area kill on the mission?
Not during this period, so they would have refueled on the way into Iraq and then probably on the way home then probably topped up on fuel as well. And I guess you've actually brought out one of my points there, is the weapons mass. Typhoon, when you look at the range of weapons on the aircraft, and there's just to the left, you can see the large picture here, and behind me, a range of different fits. Typhoon has a large volume of weapons. So, it's all very well saying, hey, I carry 2 air-to-air missiles. 2 air-to-air missiles isn't enough to defend yourself. On a Typhoon, I always have at least 6 air-to-air missiles dedicated, which is a real, giving you the opportunity to dominate the airspace. I can carry up to 8. But I always carry 6, even if I've got a full load of surface missiles. In the current, what I'd call the phase 3 mix, I can carry 6 brimstones, precision weapons against surface targets, moving or fixed, plus 4 Paveway 4s, so 500-pound class precision bombs, and 6 missiles. So that weapons mass means that I can be really effective for a long time. if you put that in the context of the aircraft performance, I don't have to use afterburner a lot, so I have a lot of fuel persistence. At 40,000 feet at Mach 0.9, I'm only using about 15 kilos of fuel per minute on each engine. So that's only about 50% more than I use at idle on the ground. So that gives you an idea of how efficient the engines are. And the flexibility of Pegway 4 and the other weapons we have in the aircraft allows you to target very effectively. And all of that is brought together through the sensors and the HMI or PVI, how that information is presented to the pilot, and I'll talk about that in a moment. That was just a summary from the one squadron commander. They had a very short notice, so they deployed out there within 24 hours, so they were given a go, and within 24 hours they were in theatre, and within 24 hours of landing they were carrying out their first multi-role missions. So it gives you an idea in terms of dispersed operations in the Finland context of how flexible the aircraft is. Quite a complex mission, and a lot of flying, again gives you an idea of the availability and how this aircraft, if you put fuel and weapons on it, it operates very effectively and it just keeps flying. So enough on the current operations. One of the things that we do quite a lot of in Eurofighter across all of the nations is a lot of exercises. Because there's no point just carrying out the current mission or the current war. We need to train for high intensity, complex, contested future scenarios against the very highest threats. So we do a lot of training within the European nations. The UK and the Luftwaffe, for example, do fighter weapons school together. So we do joint fighter weapons school training. And also, we go to Red Flag, you'll have heard of, and other exercises. So do you want to talk about what the Luftwaffe has been up to, Max?
So first of all, as a symbol again for how many typhoons are already spread all over Europe, that hardly any exercise you can go to in Europe or overseas and you don't have typhoons somehow protecting you or taking part as a multi-role asset. And nowadays, there's really no live exercise without a typhoon which can be taken really for serious. We had recently Red Flag in the US having German Air Force typhoons taking part, a successful exercise. And again, it's a business as usual. You have the Eurofighter Typhoon right there integrated. We had the so-called Tiger Meet in Poland taking place about 4 weeks ago, where it's one of the largest exercises in Europe, where we had against several nations training together. There were 12 typhoons out of 50 aircraft, so that's quite a lot if you see the whole number of nations participating. And I can't release precise numbers because they're classified, but I can say that the Eurofighter Typhoon had the best mission availability rate. So there wasn't really no mission where the Typhoon was failing because of technical failures. Normally it was the weather, because not everybody can have such nice weather like you guys have here.
Cool. Okay, and just briefly, on those exercises we do the full spectrum. So generally Typhoon will be getting airborne first, fighter sweep. Interestingly, on a Red Flag where Typhoon was flying alongside the Raptor F-22, the chief of the US Air Force at that point said Typhoon and Raptor are an awesome combination. I've never heard a US Air Force general say that about any other non-US aircraft. So really, even the US rates Typhoon in terms of its capability. So we'll be first in, we'll often hang out and do some multi-role air-to-surface or precision strike, and also be there at the end to clear up. So you see that fuel persistence, the fact that Typhoon's often first in and last out, you see that day in, day out on these exercises. In terms of DCA or defensive counter-air, air dominance, then I've done some DCT with Indian Su-30 MKI, so very capable aircraft, very potent, very manoeuvrable, good energy, but really in the long-range mission just wasn't in any way comparable to Typhoon. It really wasn't a fight, you know. I mean, it was we just stopped doing it in the end because it was a bit boring, frankly. In the close-in arena, then the Su-30 is quite capable. So again, though, Typhoon's energy gives me a lot of options. So it's a capable adversary close-in, but Typhoon, you have that agility, you have the range of weapons, the smart helmet, the striker helmet, the close-in weapons really to dominate again. So again, where Typhoon's operated effectively, a significant performance advantage against the Su-30. And there's a whole range of, on here I've got something called CCMs, coordinated countermeasures, and we won't go into too much into that, but effectively all of the defensive aid systems on the aircraft are fully optimized, fully automated. So not only does it have legacy systems such as chaff, and a range of flares and other countermeasures. Expendable active decoys we're integrating onto the aircraft. But all of those things are automatically put together. So if a surface threat targets me, I get a vector that tells me where to maneuver. The jamming, onboard jamming starts automatically. I have the option to deploy off-board jamming, and all of the chaff and all of the other countermeasures are deployed automatically, sequenced the most effectively. What's the result of that is on the last red flag, the Royal Air Force had no successful engagement against any of the surface threats out there. None of them managed to successfully target a Typhoon. So stealth is one way of avoiding detection. We do it rather different in Eurofighter, a much more cost-effective, much more flexible manner where you defeat for the tracking or you actually survive the engagement. So several different ways of ensuring survivability.
There's one more point to that. We talk about CCMs, so the countermeasures. It's all about mission data. You need first information how to handle different threats. And being part of a big family, of the Typhoon family, that gives certain advantages regarding mission data and sharing of information. Typhoon has no black boxes, and you might talk more in detail about that, what that would mean for Finland. But being part of this big family, that goes to what I said before. You go on any exercise, you will always have a Typhoon as a wingman. You always will have Typhoons from different nations. That has a big advantage, and that's you can focus on military effectiveness because you don't have to adapt and adjust to other airframes. It's just the same airframe, it's the same tactics, it's the same training. You know the pilots. You have, as mentioned before, combined training courses, like the German and the UK fighter weapons instructor course. That means that you can focus on military effectiveness and massive firepower, and therefore be the best asset to serve your country. And that's what the Typhoon again is all about. You can only do that if you're part of a big family, not isolated.
So the mission data is worth touching on actually. So a red flag, for example, particularly on what we call the Tier 1 red flag, if the coalition forces, the so-called blue forces, are doing well, often the white forces, the guys who run the exercise, will spring a new threat towards the back of the exercise. They'll change some of the surface threats, or they will do a particular upgrade. And Typhoon has the ability within 24 hours to update its mission data and adapt to those threats. And that was really a unique thing that amazed our US counterparts, the ability, the flexibility of the mission data to adapt in that sort of time frame to emerging threats really gives you a great capability. So this slide is really just showing you the range of sensors on the aircraft. So currently we're on the front line operating with an M-scan, but an excellent M-scan. We're in flight test right now, have been for the last 18 months or so with the E-scan radar, and Finland will get the very latest variant of the E-scan. The Pirate is the infrared search and track, effectively a infrared radar that is outstanding at detecting low radar cross-section threats that you might find. The DAS is the defensive aids, that coordinated way of defending the aircraft. The Striker 2 I'll talk about in a moment, but think of it as a head-up display across the whole visor. The data links, the identification friend or foe. Lightning 3 here is the current in service, but we're flying Lightning 5 now, so a next-gen pod. All of that information is fused into one clear, coherent picture, so the pilot can cut through the fog of war and really have complete situational awareness. And that's where I think in Western Europe and the US we have had an advantage over some of the threats that are out there. Information superiority, the ability to actually in cockpit get all that information and make sure that you can employ the weapons. So I'm going to talk about current capabilities. We'll do a little bit more about weapons that are on the aircraft. I guess the point here is when you look at Typhoon with all of these weapons, it doesn't look overloaded. It doesn't look too busy. And often a fighter pilot will say, if you look at an aircraft and it looks right, it flies right. Typhoon looks kick-ass, and that's how it flies. And with all of these weapons on, you know, I've got airborne in Nellis, which is about 3,000 feet with plus 35 degrees, 6,000 pounders on the aircraft, as well as 6 missiles. And it still leaps into the air like a startled gazelle. That performance is, you see the biggest difference above 40,000 feet, where you just don't see the other aircraft out there. And when you look at some of the other aircraft, particularly some of the other delta wing aircraft, they look a bit overloaded when they're carrying that many weapons. Typhoon's got a big wing area, a lot of spare performance. In terms of the weapons on the aircraft, really a key capability for us is the Meteor weapon. So I'm going to dwell on that to a certain extent. The Meteor weapon is just being introduced on the front line in the nations right now, so the RAF has started flying with this at the front line at Lossiemouth just recently. And really, the marketing is an MBDA, it's a European weapon. They talk about it as a game changer. And that's not just a marketing buzzword. As we are starting to fly with this weapon, we are realizing how much of a huge advantage and the unique capabilities of the weapon. And I'll talk about that a little bit right now. You can see here a video from flight test releases from the Typhoon. What are the differences? Well, I guess a key element is the fact that on a current missile, you see the red line there. What that's trying to show is the acceleration, so the speed over launch through time or range. On a current missile, you get a big boost, and then the aircraft is effectively gliding and slowing down. So at the point where you're trying to engage the threat aircraft, the missile is actually running out of energy. Meteor comes off maybe not such a quite high speed at the very start, but actually a much higher average speed throughout the time of flight. And the weapon's very smart, so it knows when it's going to intercept the threat. And actually what will often happen is it will throttle up at the end game, so at the point where the missile really needs energy, it's got that energy, maximum manoeuvrability, so a huge increase in the lethality and the probability of kill with the weapon. So not just a much longer range in terms of launch ranges, but a huge increase in lethality. This picture is trying to show you the Meteor threat superimposed around a threat aircraft. So with a current ramp, we talk about no escape ranges. So generally if aircraft are flying towards each other, you can launch at very long ranges. If a threat aircraft knows it's being targeted, it will try to escape, do a run away, try and escape maneuver. But there are certain ranges at which, even if that aircraft turns away and accelerates, it cannot escape. The missile will chase it down. That's quite significant in air-to-air combat, particularly long-range combat. But for Meteor, those ranges are about, the no escape ranges are about 3 times what they are for current medium-range air-to-air missiles that are in service around the Western Europe and the US at the moment. And that's a unique capability. It's not something that the US missile has. This is unique to the MBDA Meteor. If I put that into a kind of tactical scenario, you'll see a Typhoon here with a threat aircraft, a generic threat aircraft. If I'm carrying the AMRAAM, the current missile, there's a threat bubble superimposed around the threat aircraft. I have to fly my Typhoon into this area to release the AMRAAM. But the adversary has a threat bubble, and for current threats, that's about the same size. But with Meteor, I have a much, much larger engagement zone, so I can already launch my weapon against a threat aircraft, and he has no shot on me. Now I have the sensors on Typhoon, the large aperture radar, the E-scan radar here, to actually employ at those ranges. If you've got an aircraft and look around the aircraft that are here today, some of those aircraft have got much smaller noses. That directly relates to the sensitivity and power output of the radar. So they're not going to be able to employ Meteor at the same ranges. Particularly if you put that performance on Typhoon as well. Again, this bubble grows according to how fast and high you are. So that performance advantage that Eurofighter has gives you a unique advantage. After I've launched the maneuver, I'm going to turn away, as you would expect. And that's as far as you can turn away with a fixed E-scan radar, because that's just the laws of physics, about 60 or 70 degrees. But with the E-scan, our reposition of the E-scan, I can turn through 90 degrees. That gives the threat aircraft a tracking problem because of the way physics works on radar, but also I can still update because of the repositioner. So a huge tactical advantage, and he now has to try and get even closer to me. So he's going to be neutralized, engaged, and destroyed way before he ever gets a shot on Typhoon. And that's really a unique area. One other thing that's unique about the Typhoon integration is that it has a two-way data link. So not only do I initially update the weapon on where the threat is, but actually the weapon gives its status back to me. And that gives me a huge range of tactical information. And again, without going into classified details, increases the probability of kill and the lethality of that weapon. So really a very high capability. That really is Typhoon performance, the performance of the weapon, the combat ID capability, means that the Meteor is a huge deterrent threat against anything that's out there. And they really have to put a big bubble around any Eurofighter because they know the weapon's capability. For contested strike now, rather than going deep into the heart of enemy territory, you can actually have a weapon such as Storm Shadow, Typhoon, or any of those sorts of weapons that you can launch hundreds of kilometers from the threat area. And this is something that Storm Shadow is well proven now in combat. What I'm going to show you on this video is it'll show a little bit of maneuverability. You'll see the lethality of the warhead in a moment as well. So you can see the ability of the weapon to broach and to penetrate very deep threats. And just coming up, I want you to see the maneuverability of the weapon. So it's quite a stealthy weapon, but actually you'll see it do quite a hard turn. So the weapon is actually quite maneuverable and actually quite survivable, even against quite high threats. What you're looking at here is one of Saddam Hussein's bunkers, so one of the very earliest uses of the weapon. We didn't have quite so much knowledge about the weapon, so against some of the bunkers, the very high important threats, we put two weapons against the bunker. And what you're seeing here is a British and a US intelligence officer pointing at the hole, but that's not a hole that one Storm Shadow's made. They were launched hundreds of kilometers away. It's so accurate that actually, by coincidence, or by accuracy, two weapons went down the same hole. And they're showing you the entry paths, and you can see that as they point into the hole, those are the two separate flight paths or positions of the Storm Shadow into the bunker. And in fact, when the US intelligence initially, from the air, looked at that bunker, they said, guys, you only put like a little tiny hole in that. We need to go in there with a B-52, really flatten it. And we were like, now let's just have complete confidence. We've dropped that in. That on the third floor down, where we wanted to take it out, it's gone. And that's exactly what we saw. So really a very, very effective weapon.
Question, when you talk about third floor down, do you have it programmed so that it will penetrate the first floors and then detonate?
Yeah, so in Storm Shadow is very much a strategic weapon against strategic sites. So you pre-program exactly how far or what effect you want from the weapon, the route, the target area. So it's all of that is done exactly like that. So that's long-range strategic strike. In terms of flexibility, close-in, moving targets, then Brimstone really offers a unique capability, and that's why over the last 12 to 18 months we've done a lot of live firing tests of Brimstone off Eurofighter and hitting the front line right now. You can see an idea of the accuracy here as you see the warhead just exploding against that remote controlled truck. So a lot of unique capabilities. What's the real uniqueness of Brimstone is how accurate it is, how easy and lethal it is, how easy to target, how lethal it is against moving targets, and how discriminate. It's got quite a small warhead, but a very precise effect. So in a lot of close-in scenarios, the military lawyers won't let us launch laser-guided or precision-guided bombs such as SDB or 500-pound or 1,000-pound weapons. But Brimstone gets a clearance because it's very precise and very discreet. Some of the changes we're delivering right now as well as something called data-driven weapons. So rather than having software drive the weapons aiming and the weapons control information, actually that's data-driven, so I just update the mission data. So it makes life very easy when we get software updates or performance update to weapons. I can very quickly just improve that through data. The Lightning 5 pod really gives an excellent increase in the day-night capability. So full colour, very high resolution imagery during the day, and also very high resolution IR at night. And we're moving into the area of capability apps, so the ability to rapidly update the aircraft and the sensors around to counter new threats. You can see the E-scan radar here on the front. It's a full-size model, and in this case, size does matter, as I've alluded to already. Literally, the size drives the amount of power you can put out and the sensitivity of your reception. That's going to increase your maximum range. The repositioner, which when we power up the system, you'll see shortly, allows you to look to a much wider bandwidth. And Finland will get the latest, best E-scan version that's out there, akin to what the Royal Air Force or the Luftwaffe are flying that selects Typhoon for the HX program. That's going to give you a very excellent capability in contested air-to-air to fight your way through the jamming threats, to counter surface threats with electronic attack, and also to gather data, gather imagery, synthetic aperture radar. And the way that that's set up is that it's called task-based management. I give the radar, the sensors a range of jobs to do, and it just does that for me and manages those and appropriately schedules those tasks. And here I'm doing is just showing an equivalent output and sensitivity and range against an aircraft that is a similar shape to Typhoon, but with a smaller fixed aperture E-scan. And this is showing you that it's only got about 70% of the range of Typhoon. No repositioner, so fixed to plus or minus 6 degrees, a smaller field of view, and really not the bandwidth either. So a lot of unique capabilities on the Typhoon E-scan. I'm going to talk about the helmet. So right now, Typhoon's flying with the Striker helmet. It's a full width head-up display, if you like, so single colour. What the Striker 2 does, which we've been flying over the last 2 to 3 years, has a night camera on, a night sensor, so no need anymore for night vision goggles with a very narrow field of view. These are a very broad field of view, a fully integrated image with a full tactical display. Big improvements, the weight and balance, and again, as I said, being introduced right now, it's been down selected by the Royal Air Force as their next generation helmet, as the next helmet in service. I'm going to talk you through the capabilities of Striker by just talking through a little scenario here. So what you're looking at here is, this is the Typhoon cockpit here, you're just looking at the left-hand combing. This is the what the pilot sees looking out of the window. So from data link or from tactical updates, he's got a friendly forces position cue here. You'll see there's a little village and there are some friendly forces pinned down. So you'll see some gun flashes, and then around it you'll see 3 heavy machine gun or 3 heavy artillery pieces that are engaging. So not unlike a scenario you might have out in the desert right now, where the pilot has a rough cue of where friendlies are, but he has to visually ID very quickly where the hostiles are. What you'll see is that the pilot initially uses, looking out the window, uses an aim point to visually cue an update on the friendlies, and through one HOTAS position that goes into the updates all of the navigation and attack kit. And then he's going to cue visually 3 hostile positions. As he looks into the cockpit, you'll see that automatically updates the laser pod. The pod slews exactly to that position, and very quickly he gets weapons downrange. So here's his cue. He's updating the friendly forces position, so you'll see that update. And now you can just about make out the 3 hostile positions. On a legacy aircraft, this whole process can take 10, even 15 minutes of talking backwards and forwards with the forward air controller. You get a uniquely different ID. And as the pilot looks into the cockpit, you can see that he's got the laser pod is slewed in. He can zoom in, update the position. You've got a friendly forces marker to show him where the friendlies are. The troops on the ground, on a ruggedized iPad, get a real-time data link, and they can go, yes, that's exactly the target. And even if the hostiles try to move away, it's very quick to update the moving target position. This is pretty much impossible to engage with older weapons or precision-guided munitions, but with the Brimstone, I can very quickly get weapons on there and be very lethal, very discriminate. So those are the sorts of capabilities that really are unique to Typhoon, and gives it a very flexible capability. Right, I'm just going to show a little bit of the sorts of capabilities of Eurofighter for HX. You want to say something?
Yes, one more point I want to elaborate on. We're showing all kinds of different weapons, of capabilities, of things that has been integrated or are being integrated on the jet. And right now, and shortly, we will have 9 air forces flying a Eurofighter Typhoon. And every single air force has gotten or will get the Typhoon at once. That means we have a history of adapting and integrating new weapons and current weapon stocks, all according to the requirements of the respective air force and government. And we've done that with the targeting pod, we have done that with different sets of missiles or bombs. Therefore, and that's one of the strengths, we have a big consortium behind it, which a lot of big European suppliers and defense companies. We've shown it, and it will be also on the table for Finland.
So we've talked through the weapons and the capabilities on the aircraft right now. I'm going to have a short video for 2 minutes that's just going to show you the sort of weapons and capabilities that we're looking at in the time frame for the HX program in 2025. And then we'll elaborate on that shortly. Okay, so that video introduced many of the capabilities we're looking at in terms of HX. I guess some of the key capabilities are the enhanced capture capabilities and the pirate for detecting low RCS threats out there. The fundamentals are with the capability we have right now on the aircraft, with what we're in flight test with, and the development capability path, then I have extreme confidence that not only now can Typhoon meet and beat any threat out there, but actually Typhoon will meet and beat any threat that the Finns may face out over the next 30, 40 years. So really excellent capabilities. Updates specifically such as electronic attack capabilities, the smart dispenser system which will introduce expendable active decoys, and a range of weapons such as the spear you saw there, which allowed us to shape the future battle space, destroy enemy air defences, suppress those defences, so that Typhoon can get airborne in the most hostile environment, suppress those threats, locate threats automatically, identify them rapidly, and engage them with weapons such as spear. Weapon upgrades such as enhancements to the Meteor, which I've already said is a game-changing weapon, and then the maritime strike role weapons such as GSM. A little bit more on Spear because it's quite an interesting weapon. You can see it's on a triple carrier, same as Brimstone, and about the same size as the Brimstone, but really introducing game-changing effects. So again, well in excess of 100 kilometers range, ability to launch multiple weapons, very precisely strike those weapons that we've automatically identified, or disable in the maritime environment, even disable elements of a capital ship if that was the way that you wanted to use the weapon. You can see it here flying on Typhoon, so we've already launched it from Typhoon, even though the weapon's in development. They're using Typhoon as the launch platform for Spear, so you'll have it on the Eurofighter before any other aircraft, and really that capability to strategically reshape the future threat space. And the message of this slide really is just that we see Typhoon out there being, as Volker said, the CEO of Eurofighter, at the heart of European the battle space for the next 30 to 40 years at least. Integration with UCAVs in the future, enhanced computing and processing capability so that we can share real-time all of that data our sensors are developing. And then a couple of last words that Volker said. So, as Volker said, every euro spent on Eurofighter within Europe stays within Europe and is reinvested in European economy, in European jobs and the European communities. So if they want a strong defence and strong industry, then Eurofighter is the best choice for Europe. So quite powerful messages there. And in the context of the new German fighter program plans, well,
no matter how the future fighter will look like one day, one thing is for sure, we have about 500 Typhoons flying over Europe and hopefully even more. Typhoon will play a substantial part of the future combat air system, or whatever the name will be, because the Typhoon will be out there for at least 2050 or 2060, so for decades to come. And with the capabilities and the development that we have right now on our future capability roadmap, we are making sure that the Typhoon will be seen also as a natural bridge to a future combat air system, with all the engineering and development capacity that we have.
So really just as operators, one of the things I love about Typhoon is the aircraft just flies. When I climb into the cockpit, I know that I'm going to get airborne with full combat capability. So in terms of supportability and maintenance costs, then in the UK we have something called Typhoon, the Typhoon Total Availability Network. So we've already reduced our support costs by 40%, so they are broadly the same as the F-16, which is really incredible for a single engine aircraft. And we've got over 80% availability in the Typhoon fleet. So operated everywhere. Just finished with the messages that I said before. An air dominance platform, contested airspace strike aircraft, surveillance, intelligence and gathering, and really a great capability for the HX program for Finland. Any questions?
100 of that.
Sorry?
I do have about 100.
About 100 questions.
Yeah, that's not fun. Your maps, navigational terrain maps. Okay. What is this?